I never thought I was going to be able to get an owner of a pickleball company to sit down and talk about some of the things that I talked about today. How's it going, everyone? I'm Rafa, the pickleball tech dude, Harvard engineer, ex PPA employee, and of course, avid pickleball player. Today I sat down with Matt Cox, the founder of Chorus Pickleball and the mind behind the Chorus Shapeshifter, but our conversation went so much deeper than just paddles. If you have the time, I really encourage you to stick around for most of this discussion because we delve into things like why paddles are priced so highly and what type of decision it is to go in and actually start a pickleball company, and even stuff like what weaves on pickleball paddles are actually the most expensive to produce. And of course, we talk a little bit about the Chorus Shapeshifter itself, which is getting a lot of hype across many social media channels. And if you want to go grab one for yourself, my code RAFA will get you 10% off, and I'll link that in the description. But yeah, without further ado, here's my conversation with Matt. Here. Sweet. That's working. And oh no. I'm very OCD, super OCD about like orientation of like my mic and being very like straight on and centered.
Sure.
You'll have to bear with me if you see me do a little bit of this shifting with the mic at the bottom and stuff.
That's fine.
Awesome. Um, okay, well, let's go ahead and get into it. Hi
Sure.
everyone, I'm Rafa, the pickleball tech dude, and today I'm here joined by Matt Cox, the founder of Chorus Pickleball, with one of the new hottest paddles on the market right now, the Chorus Shapeshifter. It's been getting a lot of hype out there. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Love pickleball. We're staying busy.
Hey, that's a good problem to have for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure you're staying busy out there. So listen, the first thing I kind of want to dive into here is sort of when did you get really establish Chorus Pickleball? And then was this sort of like a spur of the moment decision where you were like, you know what, I keep every person who starts a paddle company talks about it, and some people are just like, I'm just gonna go do it. And some people are like, okay, let me get serious about this and spend a long time developing and see where this goes. What sort of decision was that for you?
So doing chorus as a business was kind of something I backed into. I get very excited about things and I can make impulsive decisions, but I'll be honest, like seeing how many paddle manufacturers there are, it just seemed like last year the amount of manufacturers making paddles just exploded. So that actually dissuaded me from even considering that. But it actually started with my habit of giving away paddles that I don't really use anymore. Like I got into pickleball because my wife bought me an Onyx Z5, right? Like you do.
Yeah.
And so that was like my first paddle, and then I started doing open plays and meeting people, like kind of a lot of the same things that people experience when they first play pickleball, and realize there's just such a welcoming, very accessible community, no matter like what level you find yourself on. So
Right.
um, it was kind of intoxicating. And so I wanted to get other people into it. And so whenever I heard somebody like, oh, I've been meaning to try pickleball, I would just reach in my bag to something I don't use anymore and just give them. It's like, just take this, go play pickleball. It's for free. Yay. But the problem is I started buying like, more expensive paddles that were like above 150 bucks that I really loved. And so this idea of giving away 150, $180 paddles all the time got really expensive. So
Mm.
that's actually the point where I decided to build the Chorus Daylight. It's like, all right, let me build something that's a big sweet spot, wide. It's a cold press, but it's very forgiving. Not a lot of power, but something that I could give away for free to people that were trying to get in. So it kind of started with
Right.
this idea of giving away a paddle. So I made the Daylight, and that went so well, and I had to get like a minimum order of 200. And so it's like, that's fine. I can give away 200 paddles over the next like couple of years. Great.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, wait a minute. The process of, getting introduced to sourcers and factories went fairly smooth. And so I'm like, I want to build a paddle for myself. And so that's when I started to figure out what fits me. And that's when the Shapeshifter was born. I
Right.
liked a lot of the hybrid shapes that were out there. A lot of them didn't have enough power that I liked. Some had too much power and not enough control. And so I really wanted to find a recipe that fit me, right? And so that's
Mm.
where I ended on the 18K, which it's cool. Like Diadem had the very similar surface first on their edge,
Right.
and like a lot of spin potential, but really what it is that those 18K toes are very, very rigid, but in that weave actually makes it slightly flexible. So
Mm-hmm.
we had tons of different prototypes, but I landed on the recipe where you have that most flexible top, then T700 in the middle, which is more rigid, and then the most rigid on the bottom is fiberglass. And the result of that is the harder you hit, the quicker you hit the fiberglass for that more power for finishes. But when you're doing the soft game and resets and dinks and drops, like there seems to be a little bit more dwell time and forgiveness. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this paddle for myself. The problem is I don't know what I'm gonna do with 200 shapeshifters for myself. Like I don't think I'm gonna go through 200 shapeshifters in my lifetime. And so that's when I was just like, oh, I might as well just kind of put up a little shop or something so
Yeah.
people can purchase this on their own. And that was kind of the birth of Chorus Pickleball as a business. And then I just really went deep and we launched with a three paddle lines and a bunch of product. So
Yeah, for sure. No, I really appreciate you sort of like diving into the whole process itself. You answered several things that were already on my mind.
sorry.
You know,
I think
I've
I already answered all the questions.
Yeah, you are. Actually, we're done here. We don't need to go any further. Here's the shortest interview ever. No, but I was very interested, like you mentioned, with the shapeshifter having that 18K weave, very reminiscent of what Diadem was doing. But yeah, at the same time, something that I realized very early on about the paddle was that it felt very solid upon impact, wasn't too poppy, wasn't too powerful, but was sort of like that Goldilocks level of both. And then the control was just great. So, with that kind of weave, with that toe size, like you were explaining, tends to be for the people at home who might not understand the difference, what 18K really means. The toe size really, in essence, deals with the width of the carbon fibers themselves that make up the face of the paddle. And so the higher the number goes, generally, the more stiff the face
Right.
feels.
Which sounds
So
confusing. Yeah.
right, exactly. It's counterintuitive, but no, the way that it sounds like you did a lot of research in how to construct this paddle to add different facets to it to sort of reduce that level of stiffness and give it that extra dwell time.
Yeah, and it wasn't really until later that I realized, like, because reading all these papers and documents on the research of, when you add more, yeah, like the 18K, the actual toes, you're supposed to make it more rigid. So I'm like, I don't understand at first, like, why it doesn't feel as stiff when it's on, but it's the weave itself that adds the flexibility just with more rigid toes. So it
Yeah.
sounds counterintuitive, like that should be stiff, but in the weave, like if it was all unidirectional, like it would probably hold up a little bit. It would probably feel a lot more stiff.
Yes.
Um, but uh, but yeah, no. But at the end of the day, like all of the technical babble aside, like everything doesn't matter what stats you read and whatnot, everything just comes down to how does the paddle feel to you, right?
Mhm.
Like that's why demoing is actually so important. So ultimately, I came to that recipe because it felt the best for me and fit my game, and I just kind of hoped other people would also feel the same.
Yeah. No, it's compliments to you that, so many people are talking about it then because, so many people feel very similarly about what a paddle has to offer. I think somebody I forget his name who co-hosts John Q's podcast with him,
Eddie.
but like
Okay.
one of the things he said was like he said that paddle does everything. And then I talk a lot with Lewis Pickleball Pursuit, and I think one of his title for his review of the paddle was almost the same. He was like, "This paddle can do it all," right? So I think all of that just, yeah, compliments to the recipe that you came to.
Thanks.
Um, but also, so I want to think about the name Chorus.
Mhm.
So where I get the understanding of where the name kind of comes from, and that I read a little bit about your guys showing the frequency and sort of like the note that each paddle emits.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sort of, where did that come from? Like, why did you settle on the name Chorus? And then there's so many ways to sort of differentiate yourself as a paddle company nowadays, but why did you settle on this specific way? What does it mean to you?
I mean, it's kind of a convergence of a lot of things that I love in my life. Like you can see behind me,
Yeah.
guitar. Like I've been a musician most of my life, and I love recording. I've done rock bands, I've done choirs. So like the idea of singing in a chorus is it's just a musical term.
Yes.
And it was very important for me to figure out some sort of brand that was almost value neutral, like, oh, that's a word. And so then we could fill in meaning by what we do into what it is, but it's also thematic. So the I one of my drilling partners, or my main drilling partner, is Brian Fitzpatrick, who is the owner of Graffiti. He's that makes the swing weight machine, the
Awesome. Yeah.
SW1 that almost everybody I feel like uses.
Yeah. Use it
Um,
myself.
and so oh, awesome. Yeah,
Mhm.
so he was talking about the frequency of the sweet spot node once, and like he was just telling me, it's like, yeah, that it emits a frequency, like, and then it falls off over time. And then I was like, oh, I wish you didn't tell me that, because like now I have to run with that for some reason. And so it was kind of my hope, and I don't really have a plan or a solid plan yet as far as how to objectively describe how large a sweet spot is. But that's a very interesting research to me, because everybody, like, it's kind of a subjective measurement right now of where
Yeah.
the sweet spot is and where you feel it starts to fall off. And so, but
Hmm.
knowing that the center node of where the sweet spot is on a certain paddle emits a frequency, and following that fall off over time is very interesting to me. So it's something that I want to continue to work on to see how to quantify, so that when I tell you that the shapeshifter emits a 368 hertz sweet spot frequency, and
Hmm.
that musical note's kind of an F sharp 4, it's kind of fun for now, but there actually is some objectivity behind it for how I want to grow our paddles in the future. And not, I don't necessarily want to take part in the trampoline race right now and have the highest MPHs on a paddle, because I think we're going to see the end of that within a year anyway.
Right.
But like, it's all about feel. Like, how do we maximize the sweet spot so that we can use more of the paddle? Because I think that's kind of where I want to spend a lot of my next phase
Hmm.
research.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting then. So you're saying, and that wasn't going to be one of my questions as well, was like, is this just sort of like something to differentiate the brand itself, or yeah, there's their actual, you know, does the paddle emit a certain frequency that you're looking for and you're like, okay, like this is sort of this is indicative that I've done something right here versus something else. And it sounds like that's sort of the direction that you're going in, that you're kind of wanting to explore a bit more.
I think so. For right now, it definitely comes across as a novelty, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it admits an F sharp, neat, but it doesn't really objectively help you. But it's the start of something. But at least, instead of just not saying what it is right now, I think it is kind of fun to get a paddle in the mail, and you know what music notes, like, what is this? And so at least it puts something in our customers' minds that does differentiate it. It doesn't really differentiate it in a very useful way for most people, but it is something. And so, but so chorus, obviously, very, very musical term. But the other
Mhm.
half of why I chose chorus is that the whole point of a chorus is many voices of different kinds. And so to me, that really encapsulates what pickleball means to me. So all ages, all skill levels, learning how to have an amazing time together, whether it's rec play and even to tournament play. Like, I think the spectrum of accessibility is so huge for this sport. And so it's just like a chorus of people. So that's kind of like the other side of why I decided to call it chorus.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I really like how you're you're blending work and, well, work now, but what used to be
Yeah.
play. So it's really, any opportunity you have to do that, is, it's a really great opportunity. So that's really great to hear. And so I assume this also has something to do with the motto, of course, pickleball, find your frequency.
Mhm.
So I've read about what it means, but tell the viewers watching, where did find your frequency come from as a quote, and what does that mean for you and for the company as in general?
Yeah, and like right at the beginning, find your frequency to us, just like find your style. Like I think there's so many different styles of ways that you can play if you're just super control, or you want power because you can get a hand on control, you want something in the middle, or you like certain shapes, standard wide body, hybrid, or elongated, like that sort of thing. So at the very basic level, like find your style. So
Okay.
find your style of play. And frequency is basically a knob of a spectrum of your style of notes. What sort of note do you like? What sort of chord do you like? So I like
Mhm.
to blend this idea of style, but we just call it frequency because we call ourselves chorus, but it's also we call it find your frequency, which is find your style of play and display. So it's not just playing pickleball, but we launched an entire line of men's, women's, and unisex apparel for mostly performance gear. And because I don't like a lot of performance gear, so it's find your frequency of play and display. So we're trying to cover two large bases of style with Chorus.
Yeah, and how's the apparel shaking out for you guys so far?
I mean, it's okay. It doesn't sell near as much as our paddles, obviously, because that's the main draw. I haven't honestly had time to really push the apparel stuff.
Yeah.
We don't stock it all here, so like when I go do demos, I'm just not handing out free t-shirts or just having stuff that people can buy immediately. But
Mhm.
um, I've bought, I can say I've bought every single thing on that we sell. I have bought all the samples. There are things that I sampled that we do not sell because I didn't like them. So, um, yeah,
Right.
and I just like you know polyester like sweat proof like sweat wicking stuff or like moisture wicking materials when I play because I sweat a lot. So there's a lot of moisture wicking stuff on the site.
No, that's great. Yeah, as a fellow sweater, yeah, the moisture wicking is essential. You get the whole like stain that goes all the like the U that goes all the way down, and it stays there for hours.
Yeah.
Obviously all apparel is gonna have some level of that, but yeah, some a little bit more than others for sure.
Yeah, I was out of my chorus gear the other day, and I wore just like a cotton T-shirt that I had, and I hated it.
Oh
Like it was
God.
just like clinging to me. It was like somebody really light was just like hugging me the entire time. I'm like, oh my God, get this shirt off of me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's it's a big problem, but I'm glad you're taking part in solving that. But yeah, no, like you said, the hot topic with Chorus right now is the paddles, specifically, the shapeshifter, getting the most publicity so far. And we already delved into the most interesting part of it. The one that sticks out to people immediately is the weave. But furthermore, why did you decide on the shape that you did? A lot of companies will do a similar arrow curve at the top, but go elongated to 16.5 inches or sort of stay in the standard realm at 16. You could have not done the arrow curve at all. Like, what specifically stood out to you with this particular shape?
Again, like I designed this for me, so it's honestly just my personal preference. Like I didn't have a ton of like actual like research like this is the best for everything, but the things that I do like about a more hybrid size and shape it's just the blend of width and length because I find wide body standards to be too short for where I like to hit the ball, and then I
Mhm.
find elongated too skinny for how poorly I miss hit sometimes. So I like a little bit, just like that little bit more forgiveness on the side is something that I enjoy, and particularly with the advent of the more tapered hybrid shapes from wider to a little bit skinnier at the bottom. Like I think I really connected that first when I played with the Vatic
Mm.
Pro Prism Flash. And I was like, okay, because I tend to hit the ball a little higher and not in the center of the paddle.
Uh-huh.
And so when you have that tapered shape, it actually moves the sweet spot up. So hybrid shapes, or the not hybrid shapes, that's a misnomer, but like tapered shapes tend to move the sweet spot up, and that's where I tend to hit the ball the most. So that's probably why I landed on a tapered shape as well, because that's the sweet spot, that being higher is where I tend to hit the ball the most.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I appreciate you making that clarification there. So for all of y'all watching, in general, the definition as it stands now of an elongated versus a standard shape paddle is that an elongated will be at 16.5 inches in total length from end cap to the top. A standard shape will be 16 inches, and then a hybrid shape is pretty much anything that isn't those two measurements. And what Matt's sort of referring to here is the way that a shape that was sort of popularized by Double Black Diamond, although there were other companies out with a similar shape, but where the paddle not only has an arrow curve at the top, but the sides of the paddle are not actually straight up and down. They do sort of like a very, very subtle V shape that does move the sweet spot higher. So yeah, it's important to make that distinction. And so it really sounds like you've done all you yourself have touched a lot of the product, a lot of the R&D, a lot of the
Mhm.
research, and stuff like that. So tell me a little bit about, how that's been for you. Like how was the shift from going from somebody who just plays the sport to somebody who becomes interested in it from an R&D perspective?
I've always been fascinated by math and tinkering. So it like the idea, I think it wasn't as intimidating because from my first round of research, there's a finite amount of materials that actually go into building a paddle. So
Mm-hmm.
understanding what was like plentiful in the market, from Nomex to aluminum to polypropylene being the most used core, and then carbon fiber, and it being obviously the raw carbon fiber, which is really a peel ply resin on top of a smooth piece of carbon sheets. So like
Right.
I don't know, I just nerded out and just did as much research as I can to understand how the sandwich is all made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I just when I got introduced through to a couple sorcerers, I just not I almost said sorcerers making our spells magic. Um,
Yeah.
uh, it was just really seeing what the options were available and just learning about the process, and you know learning. And again, I don't ever want to speak negatively about other manufacturers. Like I don't think that's very beneficial to the ecosystem of pickleball.
Yeah.
Um, because but there's a cynicism out there that, well, there's just a ton of manufacturers that just go on Alibaba and upload their graphics and just buy paddles sight unseen and sell them online. That is definitely true. There are people that 100% do that, but then there are people who actually want to make good things that spend time not just in R&D, but samples and prototypes and refinements. And so that's where I loved doing that. It takes time,
Yeah.
the back and forth, but changing the recipe, changing the size, changing certain things about the nuances of the paddle until it feels perfect. Again, for me, it's not a great business model. Like, oh, am I making this for the masses? I No, I'm going to make it for me though, and hope. Which, in some ways, when you have that clear of a vision and a focus, it tends to produce better results than trying to please everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's, you can sort of provide more of that level of passion towards the project as well, I feel, because if in the end it's like it's fun because you are
Yeah.
designing what feels best for you, and then in this case it happens to be something that feels good to a lot of other people. So I mean, and
And that's what I do for my full-time job. Like I make video games, like I create joy for other people. So like it's like design has always been a part of my career in some way, shape, or form. So love that.
Right. So then tell me a little bit more about, you just mentioned it, but like what do you actually do for your full-time work? And then something that a question I want to pose is there ever a level of success that Chorus could reach to where you would do that full-time instead?
So I am a creative director at Gearbox Software,
Ooh,
not Gearbox, the paddle company.
Gearbox,
Gearbox
not
Software, yeah. We're located in Frisco. We make video games like Borderlands. That's our most popular franchise. And I was the creative
Yeah.
director on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands that came out a couple years ago. And I'm working on something I can't tell anybody about. But that's my day job. That's what I do. I'm so I mostly a designer, and I lead a team of game designers essentially.
Mhm.
And so yeah, no, I love making video games. Like creating joy and happiness is kind of a theme at our company, and that's something I've always loved to be a part of, is creating joy and happiness for others. And pickleball is definitely one of those things that scratches that itch. But
Yeah.
so yes, will Chorus, if Chorus gets to a point, like it's already like taking a lot of time just doing the solo act of being customer service and shipping and all of the things. And I kind of love
Yeah.
it because I love talking with people and helping them make decisions and stuff. But no, I've talked to it about that with my wife, with Emily, and yeah, if it keeps going up, we're gonna need to start taking steps, and maybe she like I hire my wife part time to start doing some of this. But yeah, like I'm trying to build this and our next phases with the goal of the company continuing to grow. So
Mhm.
if we do it successfully, it will get to a point where I'll have to make that decision to make
Yeah.
this a full-time career. But it's it's I think it's a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. So it'll be a while. But yeah, there could be that point.
Yeah, but I mean, regardless, the fact that I almost expected you to not have an answer for that question because of
Oh,
how new Chorus is, but the fact that you've sort of charted this roadmap sort of speaks to like the pretty good initial success you guys have probably had. And the fact that you have the awareness that, oh, this is a real possibility, it must be exciting.
yeah, it is, and I just think it's just best to be prepared for success in the event that it happens. But our first year, like I'm not taking money,
Yeah.
like literally any profit that we make after all of the expenses, and it's not just the singular paddle cost. I hate to tell you, everybody, there's a ton of expenses that go into like selling a paddle.
Mhm.
But no, it's all being poured into reorders for paddles that are successful, and new paddles like the Chorus Fire and the R&D and the sampling. So we're pretty much taking every cent and pouring it right back into the company for at very least the first year, just so
Mhm.
that we can establish the brand and continue to innovate to a spot where we can expand the business plan. But for right now, I honestly just care about continuing to invest in the products and the company and making a better paddle for the
Awesome.
next time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm really happy you brought that up. That was going to be the next thing I wanted to focus on. So I know that you guys have a little bit of an emphasis of being accessible, that goes down to the roots of the company. And so you showed that, the core shapeshifter is 190. It's significantly less than a lot of the big brand paddle names out there.
Mhm.
But there's some people out there who would say like, oh, at 190, the shapeshifter is only $30 less than the double black diamond, right? And I think for a lot of that difference, as to why you'd get one or the other, or why you would say you're still accessible, part of it has to do obviously with by player, what they feel
Mhm.
is best. But a lot of it definitely has to do with a lot of costs, especially to you as a much smaller company who is not diversified into other sports or anything like that, and
Totally.
some of the costs that you have to endure there. So you already mentioned, a lot of the profits you're making, you're reinvesting into what to do into, what to do next. And obviously, like not every cost that you're worrying about is the singular unit cost of the paddle. Can you
Mhm.
tell me a couple of other things that customers probably overlook when it comes to actually pricing, but still wanting to be accessible, but also doing something that makes good business sense?
Sure. Yeah, and I also have a thought on the actual price of the Shapeshifter versus the other ones as well. But I
Sure.
mean, shipping from overseas is not cheap at all. That
Mhm.
goes into the cost of a paddle. It's $1,500 just to get the USAP approval testing. If you make it the first time, that's a significant cost, especially for small companies that don't order runs of like 10,000 like the big
Yeah.
guys do,
And
right?
how
So
many paddles do you have to submit for approval?
you have to six. So
Six.
yeah, six. It's not that bad as far as the paddles are concerned, but $1,500 is not trivial
Yeah.
when you're going, okay, how do I make my money back? But then setting up like we use Shopify like a lot of small businesses do. That is a subscription. Every time somebody buys something and we do credit card processing, that's 2.9%.
Mhm.
There's shipping. There's oh my gosh, marketing, placement, fees for transactions. Like I mean, there's such a wide variety. I am missing big ones here. What am I missing? But like everything that you do from R&D to sampling, because like every time we get a new prototype, that's like express shipping and like that's money. Like that can be hundreds of dollars at a time just to do the uh the prototypes, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a ton. Running a store is not free. Paying for Google company email is not free. Like there's so many other costs. Plus, eventually you want to pay employees. Like so,
Right.
and you want to save money to then reorder. So all of that is calculated into how we set. Now, that said, because you touched on it, I know we don't have a lot of time, but um, I'm not very comfortable with the 189 price. That
Okay.
is going to be the highest price I ever want to sell a paddle. I never
Okay.
want to go higher than the Shapeshifter.
Mhm.
The main reason that we do is that weave of 18K is the most expensive surface on the market. It's much more expensive than titanium. It's much more expensive than Kevlar. It's way more expensive than T700, even Toray brand T700. It is quite literally the most expensive surface you can put on a paddle, and I hate that I love it
Uh,
because it's like I hate that I fell in love with it because even other surfaces we tried, I was like, oh, so it is
right.
my intention. So when the fire comes out, it will be less than 180. It will not be 189. The fire will be less. And so we want to create great value for customers so they don't have to spend near 200 or over for a paddle for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because it's exactly where my mind as a consumer goes, is that you see with the vast majority of companies, like they have their flagship model, their next paddle goes up a little bit more, then the next one's a little bit more and more and more. And so each one is
Yep.
just a little bit more expensive than the last. So I've never heard from anybody that the triaxial weave is the most expensive weave that you can get.
I
So
mean, maybe
that's
there's ones out there, but I'm very familiar with all the ones that are available.
I want to pause here briefly in the discussion because this was a major turning point for me in my mindset towards pickleball paddles. It had never really occurred to me that the triaxial weave of all of them would be the most expensive to produce. What with all the new Kevlar and titanium weaves and all these other things in between that have been coming out recently, you would think that those are the more expensive ones to produce, but that's not true in reality. It's little tidbits like this that really help me understand why companies price where they do, especially when they're not just straight up buying their paddles from China and relabeling them. But yeah, that's just some food for thought. So let's get back into the conversation.
I'm not comfortable with 189 as a price. 18, yeah, 3D 18K is the most expensive surface that we as a manufacturer can source, which is what influences why we went as high as we did for that price, which again, I'm not very comfortable with that high price.
Yeah. So that's it's definitely a unique take to have in the market right now. So it's really and I mean it makes sense. I think that, you know, you especially in the beginning, you price to fund the future growth.
Mm-hmm.
Um where, you know, people start to push back is when like I said before, bigger companies that especially are diversified against really any type of risk possible by investing in pickleball,
Yep.
and instead continue to choose to price higher and higher and higher. And then, you know, one thing I do want to mention is that while I've tested the shapeshifter for a while now, I've experienced no issues, you know, QC wise at all. Whereas, you
Awesome.
know, like you're seeing, there's several paddles out there, you know, you're not only dropping way more, but you're also getting to use it for way less time before you have to warranty it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think, yeah, all of it's just a testament to your process, and I think it's great.
I appreciate it because I was pretty OCD with the two factories we used for our three paddles on quality control, and making sure that we weren't shipped things that shouldn't pass for a variety of reasons. And so, so far we've only had one paddle. I mean, like one paddle that has come back for any sort of manufacturer defect warranty. And like, I lost sleep. I lost sleep that night. So, because I care that again, like I got into pickleball or this company because I love the game of pickleball. And so just the thought that somebody had a poor experience that they spent $189 on, like I lose sleep. But I mean, immediately sent them out another paddle. I mean, whatever. That's why warranties exist, because
Right.
as careful as you can be with your quality control and it can pass all the tests on the way out, sometimes one out of 1,000 will, not be right. And that's just part of doing business. I think the most important thing for manufacturers and companies like us is the question is, how do you take care of your customer? And if you do see a line that for some reason, like one out of every three paddles is failing or something like that, then that seems like a larger issue to me. But yeah,
Mm.
no, taking care of our customers is very, very important, and getting all of our paddles right the first time is also important. But we're learning too, right? This is our first foray into paddles, and we're going to continue to make better processes. So.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, so and yeah, I think the last thing I kind of wanted to cover with you is, you know, you have any like concrete goals for the near future, somewhere that you want to be by the end of 2024? I know you've mentioned a couple of times the new fire paddle
Mhm.
that's going to be coming soon that I'm excited to see. You know, but what else, anything else that you're hoping to accomplish, let's say by the end of 2024?
Man, this is gonna sound so boring. But like my goals for 2024 are almost done. Like I wanted
Uh,
to launch four paddles. I wanted to launch a cold press starter paddle, and we did in the daylight. I wanted to get a thermoformed paddle near $100, that's elongated, which is the Echo. It's $119 T700 thermoformed paddle. So very big value proposition. We don't talk about those a lot because they're pretty boring to, I think, like for the enthusiast community, like that does nothing for people. So,
yeah.
but locally, when I go to demos, people buy a lot of daylights and buy a lot of echoes, especially because of the value
Interesting.
proposition. Um, and so the goals were really to launch four. So we got two control paddles out, one cold, one thermoformed. And we launched an all court thermoformed, which is the shapeshifter. And so I want to complete the line. That's the 2024 goal, is to get the power paddle out. But again, it's like, what is a power paddle I would use in singles? So I'm designing the fire for me in singles.
Hmm.
Um, and so if once we launch the fire, that's like goals are done. But now I've sort of pivoted to, okay, now I'm understanding the market better. Like as I'm getting more customer feedback, like where do we grow the shapeshifter line? And how do we grow the shapeshifter line? Do we make a Kevlar version, which a lot of people do, or do we make like an eco-sized version where we go T700 thermoformed the shape with the same layup, but a T700 double face with the still fiberglass bottom and the same different layup. I
Yes.
don't know. Do I make a less expensive version? So the goal for this year is to have these sorts of questions answered by the end of the year so that 2025 we're launching with a new paddle lines, whether it's growing an existing brand or model, expanding an existing model, or introducing something brand new, because that's what we're working with cores right now, and
Yeah.
how to expand that sweet spot. So I anticipate in 2025, my goal is to launch a line with the results of our R&D on expanding sweet spot. And I have to tell you, like, I think thermoforming is great because you buy a lot of sweet spot because of how thermoforming just closes the loop and
Right.
makes a unibody a lot more consistent.
Hmm.
Um, but I think paddle tech is very interesting right now. They have a cold press paddle. I mean, it's like $220 paddle or something, but it's a cold press paddle and it has a ton of power, like in that same Gen 3 realm, like everybody's talking about now. And I
Yeah.
think we're going to start to see a shift. I don't want to say away from thermoformed as like, and like the discussion of Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, like there's this assumption it's better, it's better, it's better. And I think we're going to start to see a shift in mindset. And I think paddle tech made a great splash for that conversation. So
Yeah.
um, all I care about again is when you put it in your hands and you play with it, how does it feel? Because most of the mainstream is not going to care if it's thermoformed or what the materials are specific, like what the hot new trendy material is. They just care that it plays good. And
Yeah.
so I want to make up my mind like what our direction is there.
And I'm all about, I have an engineering background. I love stats. I love numbers. But when it comes down to it, to the average person who's going to look at a paddle, watch a review, and try to actually buy it, what matters for real is how much time I spend talking about what it felt like to play with it.
Yep.
And the most value that I can add is by just continuing to play and continuing to play with things of different shapes, of different styles, etc., so that I can give people a better understanding of how it feels, as opposed to trying to spend a lot of time explaining the different gimmicks and technology and things like that, which plenty of people have made dedicated videos on already that do a great job explaining it as is.
Yep. And I don't think metrics are bad or unuseful at all,
Oh
because I
no,
think
yeah.
particularly swing weight, and I know John in particular has talked about, he's working with Brian Fitzpatrick, the
Yeah.
Buffetti guy, on a hand speed index sort of thing, because swing weight doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. But I
Yeah.
think if somehow we can make the mainstream connection of, oh, this paddle feels heavy, but then you do have a paddle database that has all of these metrics, and it's like, okay, my paddle feels heavy, well, that's because it shares these particular properties. I think those can be useful when shopping for a different paddle. It's like, oh, you're going to want something in here, so maybe look it over here. But the problem is, I think in my experience, most people don't want to think too much about it. They want
Yeah.
to pick up a paddle. How does it feel? Yes or no, and they move on.
Yeah. When I was first starting, the most things I ever orders I ever got on like an affiliate commission was just people that knew what I did and would come up to me with their paddle and be like, "Hey, I don't want this paddle again, but I want something that feels similar. What should I do?"
Yes.
And then I reach into my magic bag of tricks where I have 17 different paddles and I'm like, I've hit that one, try this one. They hit it a few times and they're like, "Yep, this feels great. I'm gonna go back and get this one." Like it's as simple as that. It's like it's a lot. Like I really appreciate companies that have like demo, like demo programs and things like that. Just so that, yeah, people can get a feel for what they're doing. And yeah, I think it's a really, really great approach. But yeah,
Yeah.
listen, I think duty calls for the both of us, the
Yeah.
old ball and chain that is work. But yeah, once again, everybody, this is a great conversation, Matt. You guys can follow Chorus at Chorus Pickleball on several different platforms. Instagram and YouTube are all great. And again, Matt, thanks so much for sitting down, having this conversation with me, and telling
Of
people
course.
more. People are going to want to know more and more about Chorus as the months come, I'm sure.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, man.
Of course. All right, Matt. We'll talk later. Thanks so
All right.
much.
All right. See you, man.
You have a good one.